Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today we are going to make something from a new series. I've never attempted it before because I've always been kind of intimidated. The game Monster Hunters has some very epic costumes and weapons within the game, and I was kind of inspired by Kami Cosplay, who makes a lot from this game. My little brother loves this game, and I've had a couple people suggest that I make from it, and I thought I would take a stab at it. Yeah, so today we are going to make a Jawblade Greatsword from Monster Hunters. Let's get to building. I did not make a template for this build, just kind of freestyled the whole thing. It would be like 30 pages long if I did. This would be a good build where getting a good side profile image and blowing it up to scale to print it out would be a good idea. I start by gluing two massive 48mm thick pieces of EVA together to make the body of my blade. I found an image on Sketchfab that was kinda accurate, or at least a little bit helpful. Now I'm going to freehand all the parts directly onto my material. If I mess up, I can correct the line just drawing it on the foam directly. Once I got it where I want it, I take a sharp box cutter and make a couple of passes to get through this thick block. To cut out the edge of the blade to give it some sharpness, I draw a center line down the middle of the EVA thickness, insert my box cutter pulled out as far as it can go, and pull through the foam as evenly as possible. That line is a guide to keep my sides even in thickness. It doesn't have to be perfect for this blade since it is made out of a jawbone. I know that 48mm is already really thick, but I need to reinforce that seam line with some more foam, so I'm using some 6mm here. The blade raises up a little after the sharp edge, so why not? I trace the border of the sword, then freehand the next layer. Once I get it where I want it, I cut it out, trace it again onto the foam, and then cut the other one out for the other side. Then I put some contact cement on it and glue both sides up. The handle for my sword needs to be buried into the foam to secure it, and since this part will be covered with more foam, I cut out a block to slot it in. My 3/4 inch PVC is 34 inches long. I drill a hole into the end to give my pipe something to attach to, then I hot glue the sides level with the top of the pipe. I cut the thickness left over out of the wedge I cut out and re-glue it back into the top to sandwich it in. The metal portion of the sword sticks up a little from the bone, so I cut out the shape out of some 10mm EVA. I need to fill in the gap you see here, one on each side. This also covers up my handle cuts and further secures everything into place. I glue a strip of 10mm EVA to the top to cover my seams from the new additions on each side. Then I take my rotary tool and sand a bevel into the edges. All of my reference images look a little different, so I laid down a general game plan for the ridges and holes, put a sanding drum on my rotary tool, and spend the next 3 or 4 hours carving out the details. I make a rough pass, come back with a second pass to refine the shape, then take a stone bit to smooth it all out. Crumbled up foil pressed over a heated up foam surface makes a nice added texture to my bone. I heat it up in sections and randomly add texture. The thin wood here is just to protect my hands from the heat and to help me apply more pressure to a wider space. To add more detail, I took my rotary tool with a stone bit and dug the edge of it down into the foam to make lines. I try and follow the flow of my ridges. To add even more texture, I take my wood burner and burn in deeper ridges, holes, and cracks. Be careful when you are using wood burners, they get super hot. Also, if you're burning or sanding foam, you should always wear a respirator and work in a well-ventilated area. You don't want to breathe in fumes or dust from EVA. It is bad. Both sides of the sword, from what I can tell from my reference images, have a crest. I make the shape for the base of it with 2 layers of 6mm EVA, one of which is cut in the center like a picture frame. Then I cut out the symbols with some 3mm foam and apply contact cement to it all. The little square portions I just super glued in because it was too hard to get contact cement on that tiny little backside. To add faux rivets to the sides, I pulled out the sanding drum on my rotary tool and simply plunged it into the foam. I add some bigger ones on the top or the spine of the sword for extra detail too. The middle of the handle has a handguard. These next couple of clips are how I did mine. I start with a wedge that sticks out. It is 2 layers of 10mm EVA. This part that attaches to it is a hexagonal tube. A hexagon's angle done properly is 60 degrees where the edges meet. I couldn't guess 60 degrees in a cut, so I just hit 2 45-degree angles on 4 pieces and 2 straight pieces, then forced it into shape. I cap my ends off with some circles. The larger one fits right on the edge of each side and will get my hexagonal tube into a better shape. The one on top of it is just a slight bit smaller and for decorative purposes. I got a couple of circle stencils that came in handy figuring out the sizes. Then I drilled holes to slide the PVC through. I marked off the general position I wanted it to sit in, then I connected the body to the guard bracket with 2 strips of 10mm EVA. Once they are glued into place, I sanded them even and put a bevel on the outside edge. I also added some more large faux rivets on the outside to match the spine of my sword. I bought some large cones from TNT Cosplay Supply a while back and thought it would be an easy way to make the pommel. One cone is cut high, the other low, then glued together on the thick ends. The very end of the pommel gets a small circle out of some 6mm foam, and I used a 10mm EVA dowel cut in half to make some ridges in the middle and where it attaches to the handle. Starting with a 36mm EVA dowel, I carved out the pointed teeth for the top end of the sword. I cut out big chunks to a point with a box cutter, then using the sanding drum on my rotary tool to carve out the rest of the shape. Once I liked where it was, I changed to a stone bit to smooth it out and added some ridge details to the top of it all. I drilled out some holes with my rotary tool where each tooth will sit. Add a little bit of super glue to each hole and then permanently glue each one into place. It took 2.5 cans of Plasti Dip to cover this monster up in 2 solid coats. Because I took the time to carve in all the details, my paint job will be easy. I'm working from darkest to light and simply dry brushing layers of PlatFX acrylic paint on it. Get paint on the tip of your brush, dab most of it off with a paper towel, and then drag it across the details. I went over both sides twice with each color, and I ended up not using the yellow that I showed in the beginning. Once one side dries, move on to the next, and then use lighter colors as you go. As I work my way up in lightness, I hit less on the low points. I focus on fading out the tips of the blade, the teeth, and the ridges of the jawbone. Basically did the same thing with the metal parts too, starting with a dark silver and then hitting the edges with a lighter silver. I used a chrome paint pen for the rivets and the crest edges to make those parts stand out. I cut some leather scraps into strips and then cut an angle on the ends. Super glued it to the PVC and made some last minute adjustments when I got to the ends. I used to coach tennis and had plenty of practice wrapping players' rackets. It's funny how skills can translate across to other applications. And we are finished. Thought I could get it all in shot here. There we go. It is huge. Definitely one of the biggest things that I've ever made before. It was a task that I felt insurmountable at the beginning, and as I went through, I got a little bit more in line with it and thought, yeah, this could be something awesome. I used a bunch of different references. I found a few kind of blurry images of it in like the wiki page for it and a couple of other places on Google. The people that I saw that made the weapon already, they varied very, very much. The pommel was shorter on some of them. The teeth had little raised areas right along the bottom of the tooth. I saw a bunch of different things, so I just kind of mixed and matched what I liked most about them and threw them together. I also kind of pulled myself back from doing a bunch of dirtying up and weathering because I kind of liked how this bone color turned out. So I didn't want to dirty the rest of it up and not dirty it up, so that's my rationale for leaving it the colors that I left it. I didn't really dirty up the metal part at all, but yeah. Overall, I'm very happy with the way it turned out. Maybe you'll try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to make ridiculous-sized swords, knowing that there's no possible way that you could ever sell it and ship it because it would cost a fortune in the mail. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some...
Yay!
And inevitably, somebody's going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these, tell them, much props. It is a sword, and it is massive, so I guess I gotta hit you with it, or my fan. Ah!